Hi there, John here, and this is a response to your wonderful video on trust. And your video got me really thinking about trust and what trust is. And when I started to think about this, it took me back to babies and to childhood. A baby newly born has no option but to trust those around her or him. And the baby is fed, hopefully, and clothed. The baby can be born into a hostile environment, it can be born into a welcoming environment. His or her parents may be providing a wonderful supportive relationship, or they may not. But trust starts off in a way, it actually starts off, I suppose, as an inner process, in the sense that, for example, the baby feels hungry and cries, and there's a sort of inner trust of its own experiential process, if that's not too big a word for a baby. But it also has to rely on others, on adults, because it's tiny, vulnerable. It can't do very much for itself. So it goes, and also trust, as the baby develops, as the baby begins to learn language, the baby begins to get a sense of its own needs and wants and desires. The baby has, of course, to trust the adults around it, and it trusts the adults around it simply because it has to. The baby has to trust because it needs to get its needs fulfilled. It is totally dependent. And of course, how much we trust others and how much we trust ourselves, I think, is very much dependent upon and moulded by our early experiences. When children find that the adults around them, the parents and other adults, are just not trustworthy, that the words that appear complimentary are indeed backhanded curses or backhanded undermining of them. When a child is faced with people who tell it not to trust itself, tell that child that they're useless or stupid or ridiculous or they never amount to anything, it presents a huge conflict for those babies growing up. And it does, one of the observations that I've had in my own sort of journey of trust and in my own faith journey as well, is that the undermining of children from an early age can lead to them in later life being vulnerable to fundamentalist religion. And the reason for this is that fundamentalist religion offers certainties. It offers external certainty and external authority that in some ways can compensate for the bad parenting, for the mistrust of the adults that child experienced as he or she was growing up. Now, I do recognise that this is not a sole explanation, that even people from very stable backgrounds can indeed fall foul to fundamentalist religion and cults. And often the hook is different. The hook for them is maybe the idealism of wanting a better society. But I also recognise that when I was in fundamentalist religion myself, what I realised was that I and a lot of other people were seeking that external authority figure, that external validation. And it was that craving for that validation that led me, and indeed my observation is a whole lot of other people, into sort of swallowing ideas and teachings and doctrines that normally, if we had a little more trust in ourselves, a little more trust in our own abilities, we just wouldn't have swallowed. And of course that also comes to how we change. How do people change? How did I change? And for me, my own journey of trust started off when I entered into counselling. And in particular, the second therapist I had was a person who endeavoured to accept me without conditions attached, to be real and congruent with me, and to be empathetic with me, to try and understand things from my point of view without those judgments. And as she did, as she offered these core, what Carl Rogers, the late psychotherapist, called the core conditions, I also began to experience myself as being trustworthy, that I could actually trust my gut reactions. I could begin to trust that I had the skills inside to discern good from bad, to discern right from wrong. As she offered me that relationship based on trust, so and as she trusted me to work through my own issues, and she also offered me different counselling skills and different techniques as well, which I took and embraced. But as she did this, so I began to trust in myself. And many years later, the next big step for me trusting in myself was the discovery of mindfulness and focusing. And mindfulness is, putting it very simply, it's the ability for me to just be aware of and notice the things that are happening within me, to notice my thoughts, to notice my feelings, emotions, the sensations in my body, and maybe to notice them and to put aside the judgments. And actually, as I noticed the hurting parts within me, and I treated those hurting parts with compassion, and as I noticed the angry parts, and I was willing to have self-respect in that sense, to respect my experiences, even if I didn't like them. I could listen to the angry part of me, I could listen to the despairing part of me, I could listen to the suicidal part of me, without making judgments, without saying it's right or wrong, just listen and empathising with myself, actually self-empathy, which came with the mindfulness and the focusing. So I've discovered that my innermost core, the innermost part of me, is in fact trustworthy. That if I pick up a sense of somebody like, I'm not sure I trust them, when I listen to it, when I give that a hearing, quite often, most of the time in fact, that sense is certainly at least part of the truth. It's part of the reality, even if in that exploration I discover more things. So my own journey has led me from very much relying on external authority figures, and as somebody I didn't trust myself, I sought in fundamentalist religion that external authority. And I've now considerably moved and shifted to saying, well, actually, my body, my reactions, my innermost reactions and the complexity of them, if I sit and listen to them, they do produce very trustworthy results. And for me, therefore, my journey is a journey of more and more self-awareness and more trusting of what's inside. Trusting that what's inside gives me accurate and valuable information about what's outside, and about people and politics and all sorts, and religion and all sorts. And the other thing, as part of that journey, is that the more I discovered that deep within my reactions are right, the more I trust those reactions. So that's been my one journey, and the journey of trust has been paralleled with a journey of self-acceptance. And far from making me more selfish, this knowledge, as the fundamentalists would claim, or people who want to seek themselves are selfish, that's not true. Because the more I can empathise, I can self-empathise, understand what's happening for me deep within, the more I can also empathise and understand what's happening with other people, and the deeper that I go. Anyway, that's my contribution to your thing about trust, and I hope that it will be useful to some. Thanks. Bye.